General tone of many of the comments have been divided, sectional and too uncompromising in tone.
I felt on Thursday that he was a deserted man. In fact, when we were called, we, the representatives of the business sector, were called to the Prime Minister's department, or Prime Minister's office, on the final day of the summit, during the lunch break, to be told that it was all finished and there would be some modified tax scheme, but there would not be a broad-based consumption tax. It was obvious that there had been, if not a blazing row, a serious disagreement between the Prime Minister and Paul Keating at that stage.
The honeymoon was over for the government, and the first strains were showing in the Hawke-Keating alliance. But if Keating was to lose his momentum as a reforming treasurer, he was never to lose his fire.
You Conservative misfits! You Conservative misfits! You have not the slightest clue about where the great, vast majority of Australians live.
He's a parliamentary gladiator, really. No matter what people say, they actually quite like that. I mean, they like sort of the parliamentary wrestling style. And nobody would watch it otherwise. Nobody would be interested in it.
No, I blame you for being a fraud, for being fraudulent, for being a fraud, for being duplicitous, for up there.
He's a great survivor, and sometimes in the business of politics, which is a pretty tough business, if you want to survive, you're going to have to get rid of your enemies, and he's shown that when he needs to do that, he can.
The cost of this to Mr Howard is going to be very expensive. From this day onwards, Mr Howard will wear his leadership like a crown of thorns. And in the Parliament, I'll do everything I can to crucify him.
Could he get under your skin?
Oh, he never really got under my skin. We were sort of, I guess, traditional opponents and gave as good as we got, each to the other. But he attracted my attention, and I guess I attracted his.
Well, I did my best to stop him becoming Prime Minister on the last occasion, I thought successfully. And I'll be keeping it up.
He was a great head kicker. He was a great demolition politician. And we saw this very much in the 1980s. In those campaigns, the 1987 election campaign, when Keating went after John Howard's tax policy and sank his teeth into the tax policy. Keating did the Liberals a lot of damage in the 1980s. He sensed the weakness in the Liberal Party and he chased it the whole time.
These are all the notions of the visiting professor, the fellow who visits issues. He wafts in and out of the issues.
It is the Keating phrases which sort of milestone the history of the Labor government. You know, the banana republic, getting the cobwebs out of the place.
I guarantee you, if you walk into any pet shop in Australia, the resident galah will be talking about microeconomic policy.
The days when we could import what we like and it was paid for by wheat and wool, they're finished. That party is over.
It is going to be a more interesting country, a more interesting society, an international place instead of the closed, closeted, frightened little place it was in the 70s.
I'm not here to be popular. I'm here to do what is right.
I've been a tough treasurer for tough times, but I've been a tough treasurer with a Labor heart. My life's been devoted to working people. His is devoted to the blue rinse set over Vaucluse. Dr. Hewson presents himself as the mild-mannered professor, as the sheep in sheep's clothing. The truth is, he's a wolf in sheep's clothing. He will make Malcolm Fraser look like a bleeding heart lefty.
Talk about lying straight in bed. Brother, how do you do it with these sort of things? And what about you? Oh, goody, you. You've got your picture on the back too, the member of the National Party. I mean, you two would say anything to move an inch. Would say anything.
Someone wants to kick my tail, it always comes at a price. I mean, we're all in the marketplace. I'm a marketplace character. My policy is I take on all comers, but I'm not going to be doing sort of bird calls on telly while I'm at it. I'm not going to be in there cooing around the television sets while I'm doing it. All I can only say is those of you who know me like me. And that's the most important thing.
Once you slow the growth under 3%, unemployment starts to rise again.
And then, of course, you've really induced a depression, haven't you?
Well, then you're gone. You know, then you're a banana republic.
That was a very brave comment from a treasurer in office, but it did spark a better understanding of the seriousness of our position on the part of many other people.
I don't believe the Banana Republic phrase was a miscalculation. I think that that served the interests of the government and of the Labor Party, although initially there was an adverse reaction to it.
The most important thing about that is that this is a recession that Australia had to have.
I think that was one of his unfortunate throwaways. Paul Keating will probably be remembered for a lot of his famous comments like the Banana Republic, but I don't think the comment about the recession we had to have was one of his best.
As the recession gripped, the Treasurer's popularity plummeted. After the 1987 election, Keating, who had made no secret about his leadership ambitions, believed his date with destiny was at hand.
Paul Keating wanted to roll Hawke and become Prime Minister in 1988. The reason is because he knew that that was his optimum time. He felt that if he got the job in 88, he would have a successful Prime Ministership. The reason he's been haunted ever since was the feeling that having lost the optimum time to become Prime Minister, he would not really have the chance to develop properly and have a successful Prime Ministership. Now, Keating didn't have the numbers in 88. He couldn't roll Hawke, so he took the second best deal. He took a promise.
At Kirribilli House, the Prime Minister's Sydney residence, an extraordinary rendezvous was arranged in late 1988 to try to settle the leadership issue.
It was an arrangement that Bob offered Paul as a friend, and Peter Abels and I were only there as mutual friends of them both.
I suppose you would have had to have been in the room, look at the atmospherics, because you can only ever tell someone's telling the truth when you look in their eyes. You can't do it from reading a transcript. So I don't know what happened, but I wish the Kirribilli meeting had never occurred, because it left a sourness in the air between the two of them that you could never, ever recover from.
What was your impressions and your thoughts when you first heard about the Kirribilli House Pact?
Well, I guess I was a little shocked by that. I thought those issues ought to be resolved in the Parliamentary Labor Party, not outside.
There's nothing bad about it. What could be bad about it? And what is wrong with people saying, well, that let us try to work out the leadership insofar as we can between ourselves on an agreed basis? Well, I mean, it happens formally and informally in a great number of walks of life.
The first meeting of Labor MPs since the election, and a standing ovation for the man who led the party to a historic fourth term in government.
Under the pact, Hawke agreed to stand down after the 1990 election. That he was to renege might have shocked Keating, but it was no surprise to Senator Richardson.
I think it was obvious to me, and I said it very often publicly, the only way you'd get Hawke out of that office was to blast him out with a Sherman tank, which is in the end what had to happen.
Keating first struck in June 1991.
Bob Hawke's got 66 votes, Paul Keating got 44 votes. Bob Hawke has been re-elected.
The fact is I had only one shot in the locker and I fired it. I wanted his job and I tried to take it off him. It's as simple as that.
But for 6 months, Paul Keating brooded on the backbench, keeping his powder dry for another ambush.
Greatly honoured and more than a little nervous at the great responsibility the Labor Party has entrusted to me tonight.
Frustrated for so long, Keating finally had his prize, but with it came his biggest gamble yet. He had to try to quickly convince Australians that the long-serving recession Treasurer should be endorsed as their leader. From the outset, there were those in the Labor Party who believed the best Keating could do was an exercise in damage control in the 93 election.
When he took it on, I know a number of others said to him, look, you know, we're 20 points behind, you can't win this. Your job is to get us up there, to get us close, so that instead of being out for 10 years, we're out for a couple and we can come back.
Convention suggested the odds against Paul Keating should have been lengthening, just like the dole queues that were a constant reminder of his recession. The constantly promised recovery continually failed to live up to the promise, and Keating also had to overcome the perception that after 10 years of Labor in Canberra, it might be time for a change. But in just 12 months, he'd manipulated a miraculous turnaround. Labor actually leading in the polls after a relentless attack on John Hewson and the GST.
And there will be no GST. No miserable 15% tax on virtually everything you buy.
Keating turned the negatives of Fightback into a remarkable positive for Labor. The man who'd won over the markets and the big end of town had finally won legitimacy for his leadership from those he needed most, the voters.
I can clear this note and say we thank you, we appreciate it, we won't let you down. Thank you.
Have you tried the latest way to keep in touch? It's using Optus for your long-distance calls. Whether you're calling long